Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Israel has released more videos showing weapons recovered from the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. They've also struck the house of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Even as support for Netanyahu erodes, America did not block a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for humanitarian pauses. And Israel's opposition wants the Prime Minister to step down. Meanwhile, Turkish President Erdogan has called Netanyahu a terrorist. What is his game plan? We'll discuss that. In the US, Biden met Xi Jinping. And right after the meeting, he called him a dictator. The Chinese president also got a standing ovation from American business leaders. We have the key takeaways. In Myanmar, the junta is losing ground and working on a reserve force. In Bangladesh, the government has warned America against meddling in its upcoming election. In the UK, the top court has struck down an asylum deal, and now Rwanda is upset. We'll explain. And in South Korea, the whole country came to a standstill because students were writing a 9-hour exam. It's a story you don't want to miss. Also, if you're looking for a job, forget the CV. Learn how to make reels and TikTok videos. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. South Africa's ruling party backs suspending diplomatic ties with Israel. The ANC says it will support a parliamentary motion on it. They want Israel to agree to a ceasefire in Gaza. The ANC also backs calls to close the Israeli embassy in Pretoria. Azerbaijan rejects Armenia peace talks planned in the US this month. Baku refuses to participate, citing Washington's quote-unquote biased position. In September, Azerbaijan reclaimed the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh from Armenian separatists. Turkey's parliament opens a delayed debate on Sweden's NATO bid. In July, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had signed off on Sweden's application. Ankara had earlier blocked Stockholm's entry for months, accusing it of being lenient towards what Turkey calls terror groups. India consults Thai cave experts as 40 workers remain trapped in a tunnel in Uttarakhand for the 5th day. In 2018, the Thai team had rescued a boys' soccer team from a flooded cave. The government says the rescue could be completed in the next 2 to 3 days. Pedro Sanchez gets another term as Spanish Prime Minister. This comes amid his controversial decision to grant Catalan separatists amnesty. That amnesty was in exchange for their support in a vote of confidence. Sanchez has been in office since 2018. And Asian heavyweights win big in the Football World Cup qualifiers. Japan and South Korea win along with Australia. The 2026 World Cup will be held in the United States, Canada and Mexico.
Military equipment. There is a content over that full military.
Big mistake for them to think they're going to occupy Gaza.
It's day 41 of Israel's war. Their target remains Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital. You heard that right. A hospital is their main target. They started raiding Al-Shifa on Wednesday, and today the operation continued. Now, the obvious question is why? International laws protect hospitals and medical centers. So why is Israel targeting them? Because Israel says Hamas is holed up inside. They've also released some video evidence. Take a look at this.
We're now, as you can see, in an MRI room. I don't know when this was used the last time. It is definitely an MRI machine. And if you follow me behind the MRI machine, I'll show you what our troops exposed just minutes ago. In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you will be able to see is military equipment. There is an AK-47, there are cartridges, ammo, there are grenades in here, of course uniform, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine. And when our troops opened this closet here, which is in the main part of the clinic, this is what they found. These weapons have absolutely no business being inside a hospital. The only reason they're here is because Hamas put them here. The contents of the bag are full military kit for one Hamas terrorist. A live grenade, ammunition, fighting vest with insignia, boots and of course uniforms, and last but not least, standard AK-47. Inside the hospital, hidden in a secluded area.
So Israel claims to have found weapons, AK-47s, grenades, military uniforms, all stashed inside the Al-Shifa hospital. These claims are yet to be verified. Many in the Arab world have already rejected them. And there's a reason for that. Israel posted two versions of this hospital walk-around. The first one was deleted. Then later on, the IDF posted an updated version, the one you just saw. And why did they do that? Well, no one knows. We're waiting for an official explanation. And while Hamas does have a history of using civilian infrastructure, in this case, Israel may have to provide more evidence, more than randomly placed AK-47s. Meanwhile, outside Al-Shifa, the attacks continue. Israel targeted the residence of the Hamas chief. His name is Ismail Haniyeh. They also released footage of this airstrike. Of course, Haniyeh was not home. Like most Hamas leaders, he lives in Qatar, probably in some luxury penthouse. He doesn't seem to care about the people of Gaza. Their pain is increasing every day. The death toll has crossed 11,000. Around 40% of those fatalities are children. But getting an exact figure is impossible because communication and medical services have collapsed, meaning no one is able to keep count. And chances are things could get still worse. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dropped an ominous warning. He says there is no place in Gaza that Israel will not reach.
We were told that we won't enter Shifa. We entered. And in this spirit, we say a simple thing. There is no place in Gaza that we will not reach. There's no hiding, no shelter, no refuge for the murderers of Hamas.
Here's why that's a problem. Israel's operation was supposed to be limited to the north. Southern Gaza was supposed to be a safe zone. But now Netanyahu says he will reach all over Gaza. And he's already raided a hospital. So why not southern Gaza? That's the next big worry for the global community. Only the United States can reign in Israel. President Joe Biden has not called for a ceasefire, but he did say that occupying Gaza would be a mistake.
With regard to when is this going to stop, I think it's going to stop when Hamas no longer maintains the capacity to murder and abuse and just do horrific things to the Israelis. I made it clear to the Israelis I think it's a big mistake for them to think they're going to occupy Gaza and maintain Gaza. I don't think that works.
So there is pressure from Washington. It was evident at the United Nations Security Council as well. Until now, the US has shielded Israel from any criticism. It vetoed all resolutions aimed at Israel, but not on Wednesday. The United Nations Security Council finally passed a resolution on the war. It's a slow clap moment. The UNSC's only job is global peace and security. And when did they pass a resolution? On day 40 of the war. That too after 4 failed attempts. The latest resolution was backed by 12 members. 3 permanent members abstained: the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia. And don't expect radical changes after this, because this resolution is vague and toothless. It talks about humanitarian pauses and corridors. But the wording is key. All previous documents demanded a pause. This one calls for it. Now, demand and call may not seem very different, but at the UNSC, it's a signal of intent, or in this case, the lack of it. Israel has already rejected this resolution. They're expected to continue the offensive. But beyond the military implications, it's the political ones that Israel should worry about. Attacking a hospital is never acceptable. Openly boasting about it, even worse. And in the last 24 hours, Israel has done both. Chances are it will erode global support. Plus, don't forget the hostages. Netanyahu does not seem to have a plan for freeing them. So Israel's opposition is mounting the pressure. Opposition leader Yair Lapid wants Netanyahu to resign. He doesn't want fresh elections at this point. He wants a new leader from Netanyahu's party to take charge. If not, he is threatening a no-confidence vote. So the Prime Minister of Israel has some thinking to do. His allies are losing patience with him. The civilian casualties are rapidly increasing and the hostages are still in captivity. Hamas may not retain control of Gaza after this war, but at this rate, Netanyahu may not control Israel either. He came, they met, and we'll tell you what happened next. After a long time, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden finally came face to face. This was supposed to be an important summit, but the world had low expectations and it ended with no significant outcomes. No big diplomatic breakthroughs. If anything, the summit only reaffirmed their differences. And soon after the talks were over, Biden called Xi Jinping a dictator.
And Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is the guy who runs a country that is a communist country that...
The meeting started on a different note, though. Biden was far more friendly around Xi Jinping. The two leaders took a walk together. They shared a joke about this photograph. It was taken more than 30 years ago when Xi Jinping had visited San Francisco. His wife will celebrate her birthday in 4 days, and Biden reminded Xi to get her a card. Later, Xi invited Biden to take a look at his car, and the US president was impressed.
It's a beautiful vehicle.
这车好漂
对，
亮啊！
我们红旗车，国产，来看一下。
Oh, it's like that Cadillac we have over there.
就好像我的那个凯迪拉克一样。
International meetings, they fly those with me. You know what they call that car?
但每一次我到外面去，这车都跟着我。你知道它叫什么吗？
They call it the Beast.
野兽。
Thank you.
That took care of the optics. Inside the summit room, they adopted a different tone. Xi and Biden met for about 4 hours. The conversation was said to be candid, especially on the issue of Taiwan. It's the biggest sticking point between them. Xi Jinping told Joe Biden that Taiwan was the biggest and the most dangerous issue. Obviously, he was hinting at the threat of invasion. In recent years, this threat has become more pronounced, mainly due to China's repeated provocations, like the dangerous drills near the island. And President Xi's words have only heightened fears. On multiple occasions, he's told his army to, quote-unquote, prepare for war. So is he preparing to invade Taiwan? He did not give a clear answer to Biden. He said he wants, quote-unquote, peaceful reunification, but would use force under certain conditions. And what are these conditions? Well, neither side bothered to spell it out. It was most likely about America's military support to Taiwan. That's the red line for Beijing. There is a presidential election in Taiwan next year. That too came up for discussion, and Biden told Xi to not interfere. Taiwan, of course, has welcomed this statement. The next big talking point between them was trade. And here, China has a list of complaints. Biden has restricted American investments in China, and Xi Jinping said that they damage Chinese interests. And this was perhaps the most important issue for him because the Chinese economy is not in the best of shape. Growth has slowed. There is widespread unemployment, and the crackdowns are making investors flee. So Xi Jinping needs a lifeline. But did America give it to him? Well, there is no relief on sanctions. They've only decided to expand the dialogue, as they put it.
今天上午。
This morning, President Joe Biden and I agreed to promote dialogue and cooperation based on the principles of mutual respect and diplomacy, trade, people-to-people exchange, education, science and technology, agriculture, military, law enforcement, artificial intelligence, etc. We agreed to make the cooperation list longer and the pie of cooperation bigger.
人工智能等领域开展。
Xi wants trade. And what's he offering in return? Pandas. They're supposed to be China's token of friendship. The last Chinese pandas in America had a controversial exit. One of them died. Now Xi is offering to send another pair. It makes for a nice token, but it's hardly enough to restore trust. In fact, Joe Biden was asked about it. Listen to his response.
Would you say, Mr. President, that you trust President Xi?
Look, Do I trust? I trust but verify, as that old saying goes. That's where I am. And, we're in a competitive relationship, China and the United States.
The lack of trust is apparent, and that reflects in the rest of the outcomes. It was a mixed bag, really. The US and China are resuming military dialogue. Biden said he can now pick up the phone and speak directly to Xi Jinping. The defense ministers will also hold a meeting, but that may have to wait. It won't happen anytime soon because last month, China sacked its defense minister. They're yet to reveal why. No reason was given for the sacking. Apparently, he was the target of a purge. He is being investigated for corruption and his replacement is yet to be named. So the US will have to wait for that appointment. Now, before Xi Jinping landed in the US, there was talk of a deal on artificial intelligence, but that did not happen. They also discussed the situation in West Asia. Biden expressed concern there is risk of a wider regional conflict. American forces are already under attack in Iraq and Syria. So Biden asked Xi Jinping to speak to Iran, to impress upon the regime in Tehran the risks of a bigger conflict. And Xi Jinping seemed to be willing. Chinese officials say they will engage with Iran. So both China and the US have something to walk away with. Biden gets his hotline with Beijing, and Xi Jinping gets some relief on the economic front. And Biden may have pursued this meeting, but all things considered, it was more important for Xi. You see, the Communist Party draws its power from the economy, and Xi Jinping's erratic moves have caused much damage. So after meeting Biden, he met America's top business leaders, about 300 of them. They attended an event with Xi Jinping. The list included Tim Cook and Elon Musk. And what did the Chinese president tell them? Two things, really. China is a big market and a friend of America. Well, it's a hard sell, but Xi must try to fix what he broke. He got a standing ovation for his speech, but can corporate America rescue his economy and his ties with Washington? We won't put our money on it. Now let's talk about Myanmar. The crisis there is snowballing. The conflict is getting bigger. The military rulers are on the back foot. Today, they issued a new order, and it has raised eyebrows, this new order. Civilians are being called up to serve in the Myanmar army. All government staffers have received instructions, and this includes former servicemen. The military says they could be called up at any time to fight the rebels. This is basically conscription. But the military has phrased the orders rather vaguely. They've called for the formation of new units. Units made up of government staff and former military personnel. The junta says if there is an emergency, these units will be called to serve. And how do they define an emergency? Well, they haven't. I have a statement from the junta. This is what it says, and I'm quoting, "If necessary, such a unit might be required to go out and serve for natural disasters and security." Natural disasters and security. Later, a government official was specifically asked what this meant. What was the purpose of these new units? And this is what he said, I'm quoting again, "This is the plan to help in the event of an emergency." So basically no clarity. Now reports say the military is downplaying its losses, but they're becoming too big to hide. More troops have surrendered to the rebels. This came yesterday. An entire battalion surrendered to the rebels in Myanmar. It happened in the state of Shan, in Myanmar's northeast. Shan is the center of the rebels' offensive. The junta has suffered huge losses there. Yesterday, they released a statement. The rebels released a statement. They said 261 people had surrendered in Shan. 127 of them were soldiers. The rest were their family members. The rebels have released a photograph. It shows them talking to these families. We also have new videos. This one came from Loiko. It's a town in eastern Myanmar. It witnessed an encounter. The rebels clearly had the upper hand here.
We are not doing anything to you. My name is Mawe, Vice Commander-in-Chief of the Karenni Nationalities Defense Force. We are ready to shoot you right now, but we won't do that. You raise the white flag and walk out from the gate. Nothing will happen to you. I guarantee your life.
And what happened next? Troops from Myanmar's military ended up surrendering. So the rebels have the momentum. they could be planning a more ambitious operation. Their next target could be Naypyidaw, the capital of Myanmar. A campaign has been launched. It is called Road to Naypyidaw. And who is driving the campaign? Some politicians from pro-democracy parties. We cannot confirm their identities, but we can tell you that they have links with some insurgent groups. So this is where things stand. Rebels continue to attack the military. The junta is unable to contain them. They're suffering losses and they probably need reinforcements because more troops are fleeing to India. This evening we received fresh inputs. More soldiers from Myanmar entered India, at least 29 more. They entered Mizoram and were caught. Earlier this week, another 40 soldiers from Myanmar came to India. New Delhi sent them back. But evidently, there is a steady influx now. This violence is displacing people. More than 2 million people, locals in Myanmar, have already been displaced, more than 2 million. India is now raising concerns.
We are deeply concerned with such incidents close to our border. Our position on the ongoing situation in Myanmar is very clear. We want cessation of the violence and resolution of the situation through constructive dialogue.
India wants the violence to end, but it seems the rebels want to settle this on the battlefield. They're intensifying operations and weakening the junta's grip on power, one military outpost at a time. This rebellion has become too big to ignore, and its impact is being felt across the region. Now, coming back to the Israel-Hamas war. Such conflicts call for mature statesmanship, no rhetoric, no name-calling, mature leadership. But looks like Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan missed the memo. His job seems to be provocation, needling Israel into a shouting contest. And he seems to have caught Netanyahu's attention. Erdogan addressed the Turkish parliament on Wednesday. It was pretty explosive stuff. He asked Netanyahu whether Israel has nuclear weapons. He also called Israel a terror state. Listen in.
I am calling on Netanyahu from here. Do you have an atom bomb or not? Do you have it or not? Announce it if you dare. But he can't. Hey Israel, you have an atom bomb, a nuclear bomb, and you are threatening with this. We know this. No matter whether you own a nuclear bomb, own whatever you own, but you are a goner. And right now I'm openly saying with a clear conscience that Israel is a terror state.
For some context, Israel is widely believed to have nuclear weapons. Their atomic program dates back to the 1960s. The difference is they don't admit it. Because if they do, it could trigger an arms race, a nuclear arms race in the region. So Israel keeps things under wraps, and it's a sensitive issue for them. Earlier this month, one of Netanyahu's ministers suggested nuking Gaza. He was immediately suspended. But why is Erdogan raising this issue? After all, Israel does not really need nukes to invade Gaza. Traditional weapons are more than enough. So what is Erdogan hinting at? His entire strategy is based on rhetoric, on positioning himself as a tall Islamic leader. It's actually a U-turn for him. In the early days of this war, Erdogan was more measured. He urged restraint on both sides. He also offered to mediate a political solution. Plus, he was warming up to Israel. Last year, he hosted the Israeli president. He also met Israel's then Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Why then has he changed his tone? Because Erdogan has sensed the changing tide, both at home and abroad. At home, his support base is largely Islamist, and they're firmly pro-Palestine. So when Erdogan urged restraint, he was criticized. His own former aides questioned him. Same case abroad. Massive pro-Palestine marches were held across Western capitals. The Muslim world closed ranks. So Erdogan's mediation strategy looked counterproductive. And what did he do? Make a complete U-turn. From talking about peace, Erdogan went to calling back diplomats. He cancelled his upcoming visit to Israel. He also called Hamas freedom fighters. Listen to this.
Hamas is not a terrorist organization, but a liberation group. A group of mujahideen that is fighting to protect its soil and its citizens.
What does this tell you? Well, two things are possible. A, Erdogan is not interested in mediation anymore. He wants to milk this war for political gains, which is classic Erdogan. Or B, he's thinking ahead, because this war will eventually end. And when it does, there will be intense negotiations, like who controls Gaza, what happens to the two-state solution, what happens to Hamas. Maybe Erdogan is trying to position himself for that, for a good seat at the table. In fact, he's yet to cut communications with Israel. He may have recalled diplomats, but he still has a hotline to Netanyahu, meaning Erdogan is ready for all eventualities. It won't be easy, though. You've just called Israel's prime minister a terrorist. You've called Hamas liberator. So good luck mediating after such provocative statements. Netanyahu, in fact, has responded to them. He says Israel does not need lectures from Erdogan.
You know, there are forces that support the terrorists, and one of them is President Erdogan of Turkey, who calls Israel a terrorist state, but actually supports the terrorist state of Hamas, has himself bombed Turkish villages inside Turkey itself, so we're not going to get any lectures from them.
Erdogan has insurance here. He knows that the West needs him in Europe, both to expand the NATO alliance and to mediate with Russia. So he can get away with provocative statements like these. Just consider this. When Iran supported Hamas, the US was livid. Joe Biden warned of consequences. But when Erdogan did the same, Washington was more subdued. There was a clear reluctance to criticize him. Listen to this.
All the statements by Mr. Erdogan against Israel and in favor of Hamas, I mean, I have an easy question. Do you like these statements or not? Why you don't say it?
I think I made pretty clear our assessment of Hamas, and it does differ from the one that was offered.
But do you have any problem that your ally Erdogan is saying that Israel is terrorist and not Hamas?
I think our views are pretty well known on this question, that Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. I don't think anyone is in doubt about what we think about this situation, and we will continue to engage with all of our allies.
It's the same with Qatar. They too support Hamas, and they too have been given the long rope by Washington. But unlike Qatar, Turkey is nearly broke. Their inflation is more than 60%. Their currency is down 55% compared to last November. Doha has the money to bankroll its ambitions. Erdogan does not. So his high-stakes strategy could easily backfire. Forget a good seat at the table. If things go wrong, he may not even be in the room. It's election season in Bangladesh. Usually that means ruling party versus opposition, but not in Dhaka, because right now it looks like ruling party versus the United States of America. How exactly did that happen? We'll explain that. But first, some background. Bangladesh's poll dates were announced on Wednesday. Voting is on the 7th of January. 300 seats will be up for grabs. Now, this announcement was made in a live televised address. It's unusual for Bangladesh. Poll officials have never announced election dates on TV. So why now? Because of the circumstances. Bangladesh's opposition wants Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to step down. They say she will rig the voting. Their solution is to appoint a caretaker government, someone neutral to oversee the polls. If not, they will boycott the elections. So far, Sheikh Hasina has ruled out resigning. She has called the opposition terrorists. So as things stand, the opposition will not contest the election in Bangladesh, meaning a walkover for the ruling party. Hence all the controversy. Yesterday, opposition workers marched towards the election office. Security was tightened across major cities. Some violence was also reported. Which brings us to the United States. Washington is playing election commissioner in Dhaka. No one asked them to, but when has that stopped the US? The US ambassador has already met the chief election commissioner. He now wants to meet leaders from 3 political parties, the Awami League, which is the ruling party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party or BNP, and the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is an extremist group. So basically, the US wants to broker peace. It wants the opposition to contest the elections. And just to be clear, this is an internal issue for Bangladesh. It's between their government and their opposition. And the US has no business here. So naturally, Dhaka is not happy. Their foreign minister was asked about America's mediation bid. Let me tell you what he said, and I'm quoting from that statement. We don't pay heed to them unless it is practical and reasonable. Which embassy says what is relevant? Nobody will be allowed to create barriers to holding the national election. I assume the nobody includes the US. Now, this standoff raises two questions. Number one, can the US force a political dialogue on Dhaka? In theory, they have leverage. We talked about Bangladesh's garment industry last week. It makes up 85% of the total exports. Also, 16% of their GDP, the garment industry. And where do these garments go? Most of them go to the United States. In fact, the US is the largest importer of Bangladeshi goods. It's worth around $11 billion. So Washington does have leverage. But will they use it? Well, that may depend on question number two. How does India see all of this? New Delhi has great relations with Washington. At the same time, it prefers working with Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. So could India play mediator? Well, the Foreign Ministry was asked about this today. Apparently, this issue was discussed in the 2+2 meeting with America, the meeting between India and America. This issue came up. But India's Foreign Ministry said there is no difference of opinion. Listen to this.
I think we have been repeatedly highlighting our position on Bangladesh elections, as well as this is something that the Bangladesh people and have to decide for themselves. Yes, it did come up in discussions, but so did many other topics with the US, as you mentioned, Foreign Secretary mentioned. That is, I wouldn't be in a position to comment whether there is a difference of opinion. Our opinion, you know very well. We are a neighbor. We have a lot at stake, what happens in our neighborhood. I'm sure other countries will have their own relationships with Bangladesh. And I certainly don't know if that's the right word to use, a difference of opinion. I haven't, we had a conversation, and on the 2+2, I think Foreign Secretary has explained.
Again, that's a hard sell. There is quite clearly a difference of opinion, and India did try to bridge the gap during the G20 Leaders' Summit in September. But the good news is this, that they're all talking about it. It's a test for the US-India relationship. India must convince the US to let Bangladesh handle its matters, and the US will have to trust India's judgment. As for Dhaka, some concessions may be necessary. The opposition claims more than 11,000 workers have been arrested. If that's true, those numbers are hard to ignore. So this election season will be one to watch out for. For our next story, let's talk about another war. Not a war on ground, but a war against inflation. Global inflation seems to have turned a corner. Inflation rates are falling in the United States, in the UK, and also in the Eurozone. For central banks, it's a major relief. They still remain wary, but right now the economy is looking better. The question is, how did it happen? How did the world win this war against inflation? India's External Affairs Minister says the world has India to thank for it. Why? Our next report answers that question.
Yesterday, the UK came out with its inflation figures. They've been bad for quite some time, but yesterday was a welcome change. Why? Because inflation in the UK has dropped to 4.6%. That's the lowest in the last 2 years. But it's not just the UK that's witnessing falling inflation rates. There's the United States. Inflation has cooled off there too. In October, it's 3.2%. In the Eurozone, it was around 3%. So 3 major economies are all witnessing falling inflation rates. Does that mean that we've won the war against inflation? Well, not so soon. The central banks are happy, but not too much. They still remain wary. So how did global inflation turn a corner suddenly? Well, the reasons are many. Let's look at what drove the prices up. There was the COVID-19 pandemic, then the unprecedented stimulus by governments, and finally the Russia-Ukraine war. All of that affected the prices, and all of that drove up the prices. Which brings us to the central banks. They may be happy now, but they've been hawkish in the past 2 years, hiking interest rates to curb inflation. It might have been a divisive approach then, but it looks like it worked, even with the most stubborn inflation rates. But while global inflation rates cool off, India's External Affairs Minister had something to say. He says the world has India to thank for this. Here's why. Jaishankar says India bought oil from Russia despite sanctions. If it didn't, oil prices would be higher. New Delhi and Europe would be battling for the same suppliers, and all that would do is drive up the prices. So the world has India to thank for keeping oil prices steady.
Had we not bought oil from Russia, I think the global oil prices would have gone higher, because we would have gone into the same market, to the same suppliers that Europe would have done. And frankly, as we discovered, Europe would have outpriced us. And in fact, at least India was a big enough country to command some respect in the markets. But there were much smaller countries who didn't even get responses to their tender in Paris because the LNG suppliers were no longer interested in dealing with them. They had bigger fish to fry. So we've actually softened the oil markets and the gas markets through our purchase policies. We have, as a consequence, actually managed global inflation. So frankly, people should be saying thank you.
India is the third largest crude consumer after the United States and China. So if India didn't buy from Russia, it would drive up prices. Simple demand and supply. The more the demand, the less the supply, the higher the prices. And it wasn't just India, it was the whole of the global south. They protected their own interests, and that has made a whole lot of difference.
Now let's talk about the UK's Rwanda plan. It was struck down yesterday. The plan was to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Anyone arriving illegally to the UK would be sent to Rwanda. That was the deal. They would be kept in the African nation. Their asylum requests would be processed by Rwandan authorities. Basically, it was a way to outsource Britain's illegal immigration issues. But yesterday, their top court killed the plan. They called it unlawful. The court said asylum seekers sent to Rwanda were at risk of refoulement. And what's that? That means being sent back to where they came from. Meaning, refugees may be forced to return to the countries they fled. They may be forced to return to the dangers they escaped. And that's obviously a concern. The British Supreme Court recognized that. It said Rwanda was incapable of addressing this issue.
We accept the Home Secretary's submission that the Rwandan government entered into the agreement in good faith, and that the capacity of the Rwandan system to produce accurate and fair decisions can and will be built up. Nevertheless, asking ourselves whether there were substantial grounds for believing that a real risk of refoulement existed at the relevant time, we have concluded that there were. The changes needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, but they have not been shown to be in place now.
So the top court upheld a lower court order. What did the lower court say? It had also blocked the Rwanda plan on similar grounds. It questioned, and I'm quoting, Rwanda's capacity to produce accurate and fair decisions. And yesterday, the UK Supreme Court agreed with this characterization. And it's problematic. Whether or not you agree with the Rwanda plan, you have to agree with this. This particular reason for striking down the plan is patronizing. It's not about humanitarian argument. It's not about the human rights implications. The British courts have effectively said the Rwandans have good intentions, but they're still learning how to do the right thing. They aren't ready to handle complex problems like this. Now, it's a cringe-worthy argument. Not a great look for a country with a horrific colonizer past. And Rwanda may not be a former British colony, but this self-righteousness will be familiar to Rwanda and to many others across the world. So obviously, Kigali was not pleased with the UK Supreme Court's message.
So Rwanda respects this decision, but it does not agree with the point which states that no refugees or migrants who would be sent to Rwanda would be unsafe.
It is a bit insulting, but Rwanda's objection was not just about the insult, it was also being practical. They did not agree to this deal out of charity. It was a business opportunity for them. Rwanda has received and spent money to get ready for immigrants. At least £140 million according to reports. That's about $175 million. And this was just for preparation. Using that money, Rwanda set up facilities to house the asylum seekers.
We use the money to prepare locations that would temporarily accommodate the migrants. We are not going to destroy the houses just because the agreement was not accepted by the courts.
So the UK is not getting those $175 million back, but Rwanda was expecting much more. The Sunak government had presented an estimate in the month of June this year. They were going to spend about $215,000 per deported asylum seeker. Of this, $130,000 would go directly to Rwanda's coffers. Again, that's for every person deported, $130,000. Now, Rwanda is not the wealthiest country in the world, and that money would have been a boost, which explains why Rwanda hopes that the deal is not dead.
So if the English government is ready to propose another agreement, of course it will be carefully studied in relation to what happened in court. If there are other countries that are ready to make similar agreements to try to find a solution, Rwanda will be interested.
Well, they may be in luck. Rishi Sunak is looking for a way to circumvent the Supreme Court. He's planning to introduce an emergency resolution.
So I'm also announcing today that we will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. This will enable Parliament to confirm that with our new treaty, Rwanda is safe.
He's also going to introduce a new migration treaty with Rwanda and somehow make the country's safety level measurable. It sounds a bit far-fetched, but Sunak seems ready to try anything. It may be in the best interest of asylum, not be rather in the best interest of asylum seekers, but if it works out, Rwanda, for one, may reap some real benefits. For our next story, let's talk about exams. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with exams, but love it or hate it, you cannot avoid them. Exams are a part of the deal, part of our life, and often the stressful part. But how would you feel if your country came to a standstill when you wrote an exam? If planes were stopped from landing anywhere in the country just because you were writing an exam? And not any exam, a 9-hour test. I would say that's a whole new level of stressful. It happened in South Korea. Students sat for a 9-hour test and literally the whole country was watching. Flights, trains, cars, military drills, everything slowed down or stopped. Why? Because it would distract the students. Our next report tells you more.
In South Korea, it was an unusual Thursday. Flights were halted. Trains and cars slowed down. Trading was delayed by an hour. Businesses opened late. The army stopped its exercises. And residents gathered on the street. Why? Because it was exam day in South Korea. The day of the Sunung. This is South Korea's annual college entrance exams. It may sound like a simple affair, but mind you, nothing about it is ordinary. Over 500,000 people sit for this exam every year. And for them, it's do or die, at least in the rat race of education. This exam is considered life-defining. It defines which colleges they go to, what jobs they get, how their career will look like, and even who they marry.
I came today with the mindset of not making any mistakes and getting the answers right, since I studied hard until now.
I think we are all feeling nervous, but I hope that we all do well in our exam.
The exam itself is 9 hours long, and the questions are prepared for days. They are prepared by a team of professors and high school teachers who gather from across the country and then meet up in a secret location. It's mostly in a sparsely populated region of South Korea. These test creators must first surrender their cell phones. Basically, they must be cut off from the world. The exam includes questions on math, history, science, Korean language, and English. So, a 9-hour-long exam, multiple topics, and the whole of South Korea coming to a standstill. Imagine the pressure on the students. The South Korean education system is already very competitive, both inside and outside school. In 2022, South Korean households spent $20 million on private education, all just to get a good score in this exam.
I'm a bit relieved after hearing my daughter say that she slept well and watching her walking into the test venue pretty confidently. But I'm nervous at the same time. I think I'm more nervous than my own daughter.
And she's not alone. This pressure can be too much for anyone, and it reflects in South Korea's teenage depression and suicide rates. They are among the highest in the world. In 2021, South Korea recorded a suicide rate of 26 per 100,000 people. It's one of the highest in the world. Suicide was also one of the main causes of death between those aged 10 to 39. The reason behind these suicides was mental illnesses. Many people blame South Korea's cutthroat competitive education system for it. Those who can't make it often resort to drastic measures. But should any exam be this important? It's easy to say that exams don't matter in the long run. We've heard that a lot. But in the real world, exams do matter. They help you get good education, jobs, and a lucrative career. But halting flights for it and ending lives over it is surely taking things too far.
You remember how you used to apply for jobs? Send a CV. What if you wanted to change your job? Update your CV. If this has been your experience, you're most likely a boomer or a millennial. Basically, you're no spring chicken. CV comes from a Latin phrase meaning course of life. It's an abbreviated form of curriculum vitae. Quite a mouthful, right? But fret not if you can't remember it, because they are going out of fashion. That's right, CVs may soon become passé. So what would you have to do to get a job? Now, I promise you, I'm not making this up. You'd have to send TikTok videos. If you're finding it hard to imagine that, let me help you. Think Legally Blonde of Reese Witherspoon's character, Elle Woods. She sent a video admissions essay for a spot at Harvard to try and secure a place at the prestigious law school. You will have to take inspiration from her, perhaps, to land that dream job, because that real-life scenario might become a reality soon. In fact, for some, it already is. A hotel chain in Australia is hiring Legally Blonde style. Instead of asking for boring old CVs and resumes, they've asked applicants to post 30 to 60 second long TikTok videos. If you're feeling old, here's a reference that you will get. Bob Dylan was spot on when he sang, "The times they are a-changing." For the multi-hyphenated Gen Z, TikTok, it seems, is the new Garden of Eden. You get your fashion advice there, dating tips, travel ideas, what's in, what's out, who's woke, who's broke, who's cancelled. The true test of popularity is now its virality. For many Gen Z, it's the platform amplifying their amputated feelings. And I'm not here to promote TikTok. This app is banned in India. Many other countries are mulling a ban. There's enough literature on its pitfalls. My limited point is this. TikTok was launched in 2016 and today it has more than 1.5 billion users worldwide, out of which over 1 billion are monthly active users. A survey in the US found TikTok to be the #1 choice for search engine for more than half of Gen Z. So there's no denying that it plays a vital role in the landscape of their lives and its choices. And employers are now paying attention to it. But hiring on social media platforms is not entirely new. In 2003, LinkedIn was launched as an employment-focused platform, connecting professionals from various fields to network and find job opportunities. In fact, on LinkedIn, every second, 101 job applications are submitted, and every minute, some 8 people are hired. And if TikTok has over 1 billion users, LinkedIn is not far behind with 950 million users. But the crucial difference is who is on these platforms. Majority of TikTok users are millennials or Gen Z. In Australia, they will make up more than 75% of the workforce by 2025. Also, video resumes have advantages, especially for forward-facing jobs which entail customer service. It's important for recruiters to see how personable a candidate is. And for such hirings, videos are a better bet. Plus, AI tools like ChatGPT have now cast a shadow on the written word. But it's not all hunky-dory. What about those who are competent but not digitally savvy? Then there is the subconscious bias affecting people of color and those for whom English is a second language. But the recruiter, in this case Hilton Hotel, begs to differ. It says TikTok recruitment encourages diversity. How, you ask? They don't say. So you'll have to take their word for it. But this is not the only company using TikTok as a hiring app. Chipotle, the American restaurant chain, is using it too. Even World Wrestling Entertainment is relying on TikTok to recruit. Same with Shopify, the e-commerce platform. TikTok resumes are a sign of the times. The traditional CV was already dying a slow death, but this could be the final nail in the coffin. So the next time you're looking for a job, don't be a boomer. Forget your CV, switch on your camera, and bring your A game to the virtual job square. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Washington, D.C., symbolic body bags were placed outside the White House to protest against the deaths in Gaza. In India, football legend David Beckham tries his hand at cricket. And Formula One has returned to Sin City after 40 years as racing drivers arrive in Las Vegas for the Grand Prix. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1988, Benazir Bhutto was elected as Prime Minister of Pakistan. She became the first female leader to lead that country. Bhutto served as Pakistan's Prime Minister until 1996. In 2007, she was assassinated during a rally in Rawalpindi. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Children are being held hostage by Hamas. Killed 1 million Arabs. A terrorist organization.
Guys,